I'm not exactly sure how the submission criteria is. I would like to do a presentation to sort of go into more depth because my slides are a bit wordy, and they still need more, so I figured explaining it might help. So this is modeled after the temperate forest ecosystem. The environment itself is called Traveling Earth. At the very top layer, we have some ants, some crickets. This is going to be a Great Plains skink, a type of sparrow, and a bumblebee. Some of the plants we'll be growing are carrots, potatoes, tomatoes, and lettuce. There will be some edible mushrooms and some worms, and then tilapia and cherry shrimp. Traveling Earth is an ecosystem designed to mimic a temperate forest for the purpose of its wide selection of organisms. In addition, Traveling Earth will contain man-made crops such as potatoes or lettuce. It's divided into three different sections, and should span a fairly large space. The sections include the very top, which contains most organisms and life, the soil layer, which includes seeds and burrowing organisms, and the bottom layer will contain tilapia and cherry shrimp. The aquaponics system is meant to work on its own without outside interference, resembling ecosystems back on Earth. If all goes well, the only time a human has to interact with this ecosystem is when it's time to harvest. So some animals that are present are cherry shrimp, tilapia, sparrows, Great Plains skink, some edible mushrooms, worms, formicine ants, crickets, carrots, potatoes, tomatoes, lettuce, and bumblebees as the cultural insect. The primary producers, so these people rely on basic systems like photosynthesis as their source of like fuel. That's going to be tomatoes, which are also there because they produce a large amount of leaves for consumers to rely on. Potatoes, not particularly because they grow quickly, but because they're so versatile, so it should boost the morale on board the ship. For example, we can make chips, fries, potato soup, mashed potatoes, potato salad. They're really used for a lot. Lettuce, which grows incredibly quickly, and carrots, which grow incredibly quickly. Some pollinators and decomposers. Bumblebees although they're the cultural animal, also act as pollinators, perhaps the most well known pollinator. For some decomposers, we have some edible mushrooms, which of course we can also eat, along with worms. Primary consumers. So these people are eating a bunch of plants and animals. Ants, which I chose because there's a lot of them in number. They could be eaten. Crickets, they're a bit larger. They also reproduce fairly quickly. Sparrows eat both ants and crickets, and their size is a bit larger. And skinks, which again eat insects and are a bit larger for some meat consumption. System managers, cherry shrimp. I chose cherry shrimp because they rely on algae. So if there's any algae growing on the bottom layer, the water layer, the cherry shrimp can eat that. And then that also gives us some shrimp to eat. And then for cultural bumblebees, I'll explain the cultural role of that in a bit. Some sustainability systems. Animal waste will be converted to nutrients needed for plant growth. Since it's partly an aquaponic system, the water at the very bottom layer will be automatically filtered by beneficial bacteria, converting the waste into plant nutrients. The glow system should produce oxygen and absorb carbon dioxide, but if it isn't working correctly, proper ventilation will be available, and it'll probably measure levels of carbon dioxide and oxygen to know when to start. Because it's measuring things before starting, will conserve energy. Cultural item, I did choose bumblebees as a cultural item. I feared that at this point in the future, the species has become significantly endangered since humans are attempting to find a new place to live other than Earth. If that's the case, it makes sense that scientists would bring some form of a bee to attempt to repopulate them. What better way to do so than an area without any human intervention, which, assumedly, is the cause of their destruction. It's also incredibly beneficial, again, serving as one of the most well known pollinators. It benefits the ecosystem along with the morale of anyone watching the creature thrive. So, some potential challenges that might show up along with solutions to them. So, there could be some unpredicted growth or decline in animals. If if a species is growing too quickly, the simple solution is to harvest them a bit sooner. Taking them out of the ecosystem will not only benefit human stomachs, but also the ecosystem itself. If it's too small, encouraging new queens / breeding the animals might be necessary. This unfortunately goes against the goal, but it could be required. An unclosed system could be a problem. Too much nitrogen or too little oxygen could be an issue. To fix that, as mentioned previously, external systems such as ventilation will be present to fix any instability within cycles. Another problem is not enough food for the humans. If humans aren't receiving enough food, given that most animals are small and most plants are being eaten by them, it could be difficult to maintain morale. The simple solution is to plan ahead. Before the mission begins, planning on how many humans will be present, along with how often these creatures reproduce and grow, will be the most important thing to do to properly ration and plan for taking resources out of the ecosystem. If problems occur despite that planning, the previously mentioned breeding approach may be required. Basically, we'd remove creatures, but for purposes other than eating in order to create more of them when needed. A diary entry that could be possible among a member who was assigned to look after Traveling Earth could be this. Today, I was tasked with recording the numbers of each organism within the ecosystem, along with some other things. Immediately after breakfast, give me a moment. I went to Traveling Earth to begin work. I immediately began recording any observations I saw. Not much happened that wasn't surprising. I saw that the ants overpowered one of the skinks, which I haven't seen in a couple weeks. They should have food for a bit. Afterwards, I began counting any animals I saw, mainly the large ones. For ants and crickets, estimations work fine. We seem to have 96 sparrows in the large enclosure, meaning we're a bit low compared to last month. When examining the tilapia, I saw that their size corresponds to a 6-month-old tilapia's. In a couple months, they'll be ready for harvest and consumption. I look forward to that. Here are some links that I used. So this one taught me about aquaponics. This one helped me decide which ants to choose. I chose the Formicine ants, which actually also use sand to burrow. So some sand will be present on that soil layer. And then, oh, this gave me a list of some fast-growing plants to use, like the best ones that would be present for some humans who constantly needed to eat. And that's about it. Um, I understand that it's a bit wordy and it's missing some images. It's a lot of information. I didn't know if I was allowed to add more slides. I also didn't know if some images were required on anything other than a creative slide. I hope that this was a okay submission, and if not, I believe I'll have some time to improve upon it. Thank you for listening.